Hey friends, welcome back to BIMvoice. Today I have the pleasure to talk with Wojciech, who is a civil engineer, but he is working as a developer right now. Still towards the construction industry. Am I right about that?
Yeah.
Okay. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
My name is Wojciech, and I actually, right now I'm a programmer in the DesignBotic company, and we are actually, right now, it is a startup, and we are creating some tools for architects, in fact. But after work, what I usually do right now is this project that I would like to introduce today. So this is this .bim file format.
Yes, we can jump straight to that. And let me start this with a question.
Yeah.
Why did you develop this project? What is the reason behind this initiative?
Yeah, so there is no like simple answer to that, but first of all, like we need to understand, think about, let's say, the existing file formats that we have in, let's say, BIM industry, and the fact that, let's say, I was actually realizing over time when I was working with IFC, in fact, that there is no, let's say, simple file format when you can exchange the geometry, but in a simple way. There are different file formats for the geometry exchange, but none of them are really that simple, I would say. And .bim actually, let's say, it introduces the file format that is really, really simple. It makes it like extremely simple to exchange the geometry and data attached to it. And it makes it extremely simple to develop the tools around this file format. So it's kind of, the reason was, let's say, realizing that there is no such thing yet. And maybe it will be nice to introduce something like this. So that was, let's say, the main reason why I decided to develop it. I didn't have like big expectations at first, but it looks like there are plenty of people who actually found it useful, which is like really, really nice. I'm really happy that it actually happened, and yeah, we will see how it actually will go in the future.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned the types of formats and how complex there are, but there must be something more. You either were working with more programs together and you did not have a workflow that you really liked, or you heard a lot of other people complaining about this and you capitalized on this.
I think it started actually with some other project of mine, which is also like open source project, which it's called TRex, and it was the plugin for Grasshopper to create reinforcement element models. It is a project when you can basically, using Grasshopper, you can create typical reinforcement structures like foundations and beams, and you can create stirrups and all these different types of rebars in there. And at first it was like only 3D, so it was like you could create those rebars and there was data attached to it, in fact, but there was like no export. It was all in this Rhino environment. So then people asked me that there were like comments about this project, and people were saying things like, it's not BIM, and it's not BIM because you cannot export IFC from that. So I was like, okay, so let's add a feature that will allow this IFC export. So I picked up the XBIM library, which allows in C# to create and to read some IFC files, great library for IFC. But then it turns out that I actually spent a lot of time to make it possible just to export this reinforcement through it. And it was actually a huge challenge to do, even though I was using the existing library to do it, because it turns out that even if you are using like IFC.js or any other library, you still have to understand some part, let's say, of the IFC schema to make a decent exporter. And even like when I spent actually plenty of hours to understand the schema itself, then what I actually experienced was, for example, I was creating some IFC from it, and then I would try to import it to different software. And in different software, I saw like different results of it. So some software were like better in reading my IFCs, somewhere like worse. And then I kind of understood like what is an issue with it, what is actually the problem, and why things like this happen. Because normally when you're using IFC, like there are like a lot of different opinions about IFC and so on, and obviously mine also will be different. I just want to point out that this is like my personal opinion about some stuff. It's not like I'm 100% certain about those things. But the thing with IFC was that actually you can experience, and it's not like only for IFC, but all other 3D formats, let's say, it is really familiar feeling that you export from one software and then you try to import in another one, and then let's say half of it is missing or something, or some part of it that like it doesn't display the same way, or stuff like this. And we, as let's say as the engineers, we kind of experience, we know that feeling. So I was asking like why this happened, and if you ask like a lot of guys who are like BIM developers, and they have their own theory why things like this happen. So for example, they say that some like these companies do it on purpose because they really don't want to support those other file formats, because they want to make their own file format more popular and stuff like this. But I think I won't agree with that. In my opinion, it's a number of, let's say, features that like this one particular file format, let's say, introduce. And if this number of features is really, really big, then it's really hard to create decent importers for such file formats. And in fact, file formats like IFC, okay, maybe it's not the best way to say it, because obviously some people will say that IFC is not file format, but it is schema. But
it's not only a file format.
Yeah. So if we treat it like file format, it's actually, it introduces like a lot of different types of geometries. It's really nice. Obviously, you can like represent everything in IFC, but at the same time, if you are in the position of the, let's say, someone who would like to create the decent importer, it means that each of these geometry type will have to be like managed properly. So you have to spend like a lot of time to make it possible to import each type of the geometry separately in a correct way. And it's not an easy task, especially because different BIM software, actually, they have different, let's say, geometric capabilities. It's not like each of this geometry, let's say, each of this BIM software can actually make all of this, can actually display properly all of these geometry types. So I realized that, okay, what if we try to do it in a different way? So what if actually file format would contain only one type of geometry? And that's what actually dotbim files, they do. Yeah, because they only support meshes, which is just one type of geometry that you can transfer. These are like triangulated meshes. And if you do it like this, then if you are writing an importer from the, let's say, developer point of view, it's extremely easy, because you have to handle only one type of geometry, which is this mesh. So if you will handle this properly, then all models will load like properly. And actually, meshes are also really straightforward to display, let's say, and to import in different software. I would say that for the 3D geometry, it's like the most reliable type of geometry. There's no like that much places in meshes that you can mess up with, let's say, because it's just a number of vertices, and then you have to connect these vertices into triangles. So what about, let's say, other types of geometries? Let's say if you have if your software have like different type of geometry, and I only allow to transfer meshes. So the answer to it is you can actually discretize any type of 3D geometry into mesh. So any type of geometry you have in any software, you can somehow convert, tessellate, discretize into a mesh. So this is like the different, let's say, kind of approach. So I force people to place only meshes there, only to make it, let's say, easier from the importer point of view. And this way, actually, it turns out that it makes it really, let's say, reliable. You can be like almost 100% sure that all of the geometry will be transferred properly if you stick to only meshes, and that's different from the other file formats, let's say.
Yeah, you were so mad at these people who said that this is not BIM, that you used the exact same name for the extension, .bim. Here we have it. No one can say that anymore.
Yeah, that was actually, that's...
No, but this is actually very, very interesting and very cool. It might not be the best solution for everything, for all situations, but when you need to exchange ideas, you don't need all the details, or you don't need to adhere maybe to IFC, right? And in this case, you can use a much simpler approach, especially if you have a lot of difficulties and you work with more softwares. Like if you work with Tekla, Revit, and AutoCAD, and you have Rhino with Grasshopper and so on, right? It makes it much easier. And yeah, it's very good actually to start with this mindset, making something simple that can work quickly, right? Deliver results. And after that, we can see how much better we can go from there, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very good thought process right there. I congratulate you for this, and I thank you for this. I did not use it myself yet, but I will try to use it and see how it works. It's very nice to see so many nice things built from people on their own time that want to revolutionize the industry, to improve it, right? This is very, very nice of you, because people don't really understand. Not everyone knows what open source is, but we need much more of it in our industry, unfortunately, because we are held hostages by big corporations otherwise, right? And we don't have any options. If you want to switch to something else, it's very, very difficult. So it's very, very nice. Did you consider any other more radical approaches? Are you aware with the concept of linked data? Did you look into this at all?
Not really. I mean, to be honest with you, I think this morning I saw the video, like your previous video.
With Håkon, my talk with Håkon. Okay, that's cool. That's a good starting point. Maybe we can research a bit more into this kind of concept. And it would be really interesting if we can come up with something that can really revolutionize, because he has some good points. I don't deny that IFC is a very needed standard, because we need a standard in place to get all the players to play together and to try to improve as much as possible, right? But he is not wrong when he says that this is an old technology and we try to use it in this age where everything is trying to grow exponentially, right? So it's definitely, we need much more attention to this. Like, of course, we need to see results. We need to see palpable things. It's very nice that we get some possible good ideas, but we need to come up with something palpable that can be applied, right? Because otherwise doesn't mean anything. And I'm thinking like your approach, like very simple approach, combine this with the Web3 and linked data, and maybe add on top of that some blockchain functionality for something specifically, not for the entire functionality, right? So then you come up with something really revolutionary and not based on old standards or something, right? That might really worth investing more in it, right? It might be a lot of people that could be willing to invest in something like this. Yeah, but it would be really interesting to research a bit that. I'm really excited about these opportunities. But like I said, it's also very good, like looking 5 years back or 10, it's much better what is happening right now with IFC, because at least we get a common ground, right? Which is very important and the minimum requirement for collaboration, right? You cannot thrive in any industry if you don't collaborate.
Yeah, actually, what makes IFC really powerful, in fact, also is the fact that, like I said before, is people like thinking BIM equals IFC, and each, let's say, every BIM software, let's say right now, export and import IFC. Some of them do it better way, some of them are worse, but anyway, it makes it so powerful that well, that's actually the thing with dotbim, for example, that to make it really powerful, let's say, we have to make it useful on multiple platforms, because right now it's only you can export it from Grasshopper, import it to Grasshopper and to Blender, but we have to make it possible to use it also with Revit, Oplam, Tekla, all this software, and only then we can say that, okay, now it's useful, because the file format is as useful as the number of platforms that actually support it, let's say.
Yeah, that's very true. And especially, like, we don't talk too much about the structural analysis softwares. Many of them are very primitive in that regard, right? So the easier we make it for those to integrate it with those kind of softwares, the better it is for the entire design side of our industry.
Yeah, but we can talk about it a bit more, because when you look at this software, like we are both civil engineers, so we know these finite element methods, different types of software, and BIM, different types of like Tekla, for example. They all like started in the 80s and 90s, something like this, most of them at least.
Yeah.
And you can have that feeling that, okay, it's a bit like old. They are a bit old, and they are not like up to date that much. But at the same time, once you actually try to develop something new, you realize how complex actually these tools are. Like Tekla, for instance, there are like a lot of features that they developed during these 40 years or 30 years, whatever. It's like, that's why we can't see that many, let's say, new software that will easily replace these old ones. Because actually it turns out that it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to create software like Revit or Tekla. Even though it might be at the very first look, you can have this impression that they are primitive or something like this, that there are like a lot of features in there. So yeah.
When I say primitive, I'm thinking about softwares like ETABS, like the ones doing finite element analysis and so on. Not ETABS. ETABS might be a better example, but I mean structural analysis, right? In Tekla and Revit, you're still doing detailing. These are not them. I meant the other ones, the structural analysis software, which are lacking behind. This has been a very interesting discussion, and I think we can definitely have another chat if you would like to, and especially talk more a bit about the open source aspect. And maybe by then you will also have an idea, or will know something a bit about linked data and Web3. But yeah, I would really like to touch a bit the importance of open source. What motivates you to be a contributor? Why others should be interested in becoming contributors and to support this movement? Because this actually could be a common effort that could provide maybe tools that could rival the existing ones, right? It's very difficult to start a startup and come up with the same good product in over a few years, right? But if you get a lot of people working together on the same project, you can get much quicker there. And there might be also some advantages because we could start from some more modern approaches, like from 2022's perspective, right? We see where we are heading, what is more important, and so on, right? But of course, as you said, you need a lot of efforts, but that can be mitigated by the effort of a lot of people, right? Those years, those 30 years of, let's say, 30 developers can be compressed into 2 or 3 years of 200 or 300 of other people contributing, right? So there can be also this effort.
Yeah, but if we talk about open source, I mean, I also have like a bit different approach to things like this. I mean, okay, there are like a lot of things that I do, and actually these are open source tools, and most of it, these are the actually Grasshopper plugins. But there is like, it's different people in an open source community. They have, let's say, different motivation when they actually make it available and free for everyone. And sometimes they do it just because they, let's say, they have this motivation to, just as you said, it was like the motivation to make it free for everyone. And so they want to be these guys who, let's say, make it free. Like they want to be these guys who will help those who struggle with the prices, which they're like the software, both software, if we talk about the finite element method software and also software like for the modeling, they are really pricey. This is like one type of thinking about it, that to make it free. So even if you have like, let's say, one person office, then you can afford it, even though it's a small company. Right now, it is a big struggle to afford some of this software if you have a small company and if you're just starting. So obviously it will be nice to have, just like in the other industries, like with Blender, what we have, like you can actually model in 3D for free completely. It will be really cool if you can do it like BIM models for free as well. And that actually, if I understand correctly, Blender BIM actually kind of introduced this thing and kind of make it possible to model those BIM.
That's true, but we are still far away from using it in production, like large scale. So, but it needs a lot of much more efforts. I don't know, IFCJS might go into the same direction. So there are these two, but like I said, it's need for much more support. Like it's not enough. It's not enough what is happening.
Maybe part of it is the fact that there are not actually that many, let's say, developers who actually understand also our industry. Yes. Like if we talk about civil engineers that actually became developers, there is like a really small number of guys like this, I would say, and maybe this also makes it a bit harder.
Yes, but I don't think that's the only reason. I think the general belief and the trust in this kind of approach, business approach, it's very little known in our industry, because you don't need to be a developer to contribute. You can contribute with some funds, right? But we are still not there where we can have developers full-time working on this, right? Because there, when you reach there, then you start talking about this, right? About something more serious. But so you don't really need to be a developer. But if you contribute $10 or $20 a month, that can mean something a lot, right? If that comes from a few hundreds of people, and our industry is pretty huge, right? And people are not enough aware about how important open source is or can be in our industry, unfortunately. But yeah, it's important to whatever we can do to contribute towards that, even by sharing a post or something sometimes on LinkedIn. Yeah. But yeah, especially most important is the code contribution, of course, or money that can pay for coders, programmers that contribute towards that. Thank you very much for joining me. It was a very pleasant and thoughtful conversation, and I'm really looking forward to follow your progress and have you for other conversations as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for invitation and for conversation.
You're welcome. It was nice to have you.